The rain fell on Neo-Kyoto not in drops, but in sheets of needles, cold and indifferent. It was a fitting shroud for the end of a life that had never truly begun. Rikuya stumbled along the slick, neon-reflected pavement, his body a hollow vessel of exhaustion. The 12-hour shift at the Mitsutomo electronics factory had leached the last warmth from his bones, leaving behind only the dull, metallic ache of perpetual fatigue. His shoes, cracked at the soles and 2 sizes too small, squelched with every step, each one a mocking echo of the countless steps that had led him here. To this moment, to this nothing. Life had never been kind to Rikuya. Born in the city's labyrinthine slums, the shattered district, he was a ghost in the machine of a society that prized wealth and bloodline above all else. Abandoned by parents he never knew, he was raised in the Omoyari orphanage, a crumbling institution where hope was a foreign language and love a forgotten currency. He wasn't strong, he wasn't rich, he wasn't even noticed, except as a target. He remembered high school with the vivid, painful clarity of a recurring nightmare. His uniform, a patchwork of crooked stitches and faded fabric, was a banner of his shame. His classmates, the scions of minor corporate officials and shop owners, had found in him a convenient whetstone for their own cruelty. Gomi, they called him. Trash. Kojiki boya. Beggar boy. And yet, within Rikuya burned a secret fire, a mind so sharp it could cut diamond. While they preened and gossiped, he devoured books scavenged from recycling bins, treatises on macroeconomics, histories of market crashes, theories of social dynamics. He believed, with the desperate fervor of the damned, that knowledge would be his key, his weapon, his escape. But reality was a cruel editor to his dreams. His perfect test scores meant nothing without the tuition for university. His brilliant, unsolicited analyses of corporate quarterly reports, mailed anonymously, were met with silence. The world did not reward the poor for being smart. It punished them for daring to look up from the mud. By 25, the fire was guttering. He worked dead-end jobs, lived in a coffin-sized apartment, and watched as the very bullies who had tormented him found their place in the world's machine as petty managers, entitled clerks, and smug husbands. Even Hana, the gentle, soft-spoken girl he had admired from a distance, a universe away, had married a man from a reputable family. The last time he saw her, her eyes had slid over him without a flicker of recognition. He was already a ghost, a blinding light, a scream of tortured rubber that was not his own. The world upended in a cacophony of shattering glass and twisting metal. The cold asphalt against his cheek was the first tender touch he could remember. Rain mingled with the blood in his mouth. His last thought was not of fear, but of a profound, bitter irony. Is this all it was? A prologue of suffering, and then a blank page? Darkness, thick and absolute, swallowed him whole. Consciousness returned not as a gentle dawn, but as a sudden, jarring slap of sensation. The smell of chalk dust and cheap floor wax, the murmur of hushed voices, the hard, unyielding wood of a desk beneath his fingers. Rikuya's eyes flew open. He was in a classroom. Not just any classroom. It was his third-year homeroom at Higashi High. The same peeling paint near the ceiling, the same deep scratch on the floor from Tanaka-sensei's errant chair, the same faint, sweet scent of cherry blossoms from the courtyard drifting through the open window. A dream? A dying hallucination? His hands, small, slender, the knuckles not yet calloused from a decade of manual labor, trembled as he held them up. No scars, no traces of the burn from a faulty soldering iron he'd gotten just last month. Panic, cold and electric, surged through him. He stumbled out of his seat, ignoring the snickers from the back row, and fled into the hallway. His body moved with a lightness he'd forgotten, his two small shoes slapping softly against the linoleum. He burst into the boys' bathroom and locked himself in a stall, leaning his forehead against the cool metal, heart hammering against his ribs. This was too vivid, too real. He forced himself to the sink and looked in the grimy mirror. A 17-year-old boy stared back, gaunt, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of malnutrition, not just exhaustion. But his face was unlined, his eyes not yet hollowed out by years of defeat. It was him, 7 years ago. No, this isn't possible," he whispered, his voice higher than he remembered. As if on a cosmic cue, the classroom door down the hall burst open. Mr. Fujioka, their history teacher, was dragging a red-faced Kenji Sato into the hall. "Cheating on my test, Sato? Do you think I was born yesterday? Your father will hear about this. Detention for a week, word for word, action for action. A memory from a lifetime ago, replaying before his eyes with terrifying fidelity." The truth, staggering and immense, finally crashed down upon him. The accident hadn't killed him. It had sent him back. Rikuya collapsed against the sink, tears of shock, relief, and sheer existential terror streaming down his face. He was alive. He was young, and thrumming in his mind, clear and precise as a downloaded database, was the knowledge of the next 7 years. The Takamura Group's scandal and subsequent stock collapse. The rise of the obscure digital currency, Solari, from a joke to a global phenomenon. The exact date the Hato pharmaceutical pandemic would begin. The Kansai earthquake that would reshape infrastructure spending. The war scare that would send defense stocks soaring. It was all there, a complete blueprint of the future. A slow, steady fire began to kindle in his gut, burning away the panic, melting the ice in his veins. He looked at his reflection again, and this time, the boy's eyes held the gaze of a man who had already died once. "This time," he whispered, his voice low and steady now, the voice of the man he would become. "This time, I will not just escape the mud. I will own the damn field." The first week was an exercise in surreal patience. He had to consciously regress, to play the part of the cowed, invisible orphan. He endured the shoves in the hallway, the whispered taunts, the condescension from teachers who saw his patched uniform and wrote him off. But inside, he was a coiled spring, a predator wearing the skin of prey. His strategy was twofold: accumulate capital with absolute anonymity and build a credible identity as a nascent genius. He started with the sympathetic literature teacher, Mr. Yoshioka, who had always snuck him extra rice balls at lunch. "Yoshioka-sensei," Rikuya said after class, bowing deeply, pouring every ounce of performed desperation into his voice. My orphanage fees. They are behind. I know it's too much to ask, but if I could just borrow 20,000 yen, I will find a way to repay you with interest. I swear it." The man's eyes softened. It was a pittance to him, a lifeboat to Rikuya. He handed over the cash with a paternal pat on the shoulder. "Just focus on your studies, Rikuya-kun. That's repayment enough." It was all the seed money he needed. That night, in the silent, cramped dormitory he shared with a dozen other boys, Rikuya used the orphanage's ancient public terminal. He navigated to a fledgling, obscure online brokerage. With the 20,000 yen, he bought shares in a tiny, family-owned optics company, Hikari Precision. The financial world was laughing at their quixotic research into micro lenses. Rikuya knew that in 14 months, A major smartphone manufacturer would acquire them for a sum that would make their stock multiply by a factor of 350. It was done. The first domino had been tipped. In class, he began his second gambit. He remained silent for most lessons, but when economics teacher Mr. Saito posed a hypothetical about market reactions to political instability, Rikuya saw his opening. He raised his hand. A few snickers echoed. "Yes, Rikuya-kun," Saito-sensei said, his tone weary. Rikuya stood. He didn't just answer the question, he deconstructed it. He spoke about supply chain vulnerabilities in Southeast Asia that weren't yet public knowledge, predicted the Bank of Japan's next intervention with unnerving accuracy, and referenced economic theories that weren't on their syllabus. The classroom fell silent. The bullies were confused, their mockery dying in their throats. Saito-sensei just stared, his chalk hovering forgotten in his hand. He wasn't looking at a poor student. He was looking at a profound, inexplicable anomaly. "That's a very unique perspective, Rikuya-kun," he finally said, a strange light in his eyes. "See me after class." The meeting was brief. Saito, a man crushed by his own unrealized ambitions, saw something in Rikuya he couldn't explain. He became Rikuya's first, unwitting patron, giving him access to better books, older market reports, and a quiet, "Don't tell the others, but you have a gift." The serpent was in the garden, and it was learning the layout of the walls. The confrontation with the bullies, Kenji Sato and his lackeys, Taro and Ren, was inevitable. They cornered him on his walk home, a week after his economic display, their pride still stung by his momentary defiance. "Think you're smart now, Gomi?" Kenji sneered, shoving Rikuya against the chain-link fence surrounding a construction site. "All those big words for Saito-sensei. You made us look stupid." "You don't need my help for that, Kenji," Rikuya said, his voice calm. The old fear was gone, replaced by a cold, analytical disdain. He saw them not as threats, but as variables. Predictable, petty variables. Kenji's face flushed crimson. He grabbed the front of Rikuya's uniform. "Give me your money." All of it. Consider it a tax for being an eyesore. The old Rikuya would have complied. This Rikuya just looked at him, his eyes like chips of flint. He saw the future. Kenji's father, a mid-level manager at a dying department store, would lose everything in the coming retail apocalypse. Kenji would be working in a ramen shop by 25, drowning in debt and bitterness. "You are standing at a crossroads, Kenji," Rikuya said, his voice so low only the three of them could hear. "You can continue on this path, a path of petty theft and smaller victories, and in 7 years, you will be nothing. You will be less than nothing. You will be a ghost, just like you think I am." The boys froze. The words were strange, their certainty unnerving. "Or," Rikuya continued, "you can realize that the world is much bigger than this street, and that I am the only person you will ever meet who can see the turns in the road ahead. The money in my pocket is nothing. A single yen. What I have in my head is worth more than your father's entire company. Push me now, and you are pushing away your only chance at a future worth having." He wasn't speaking to boys. He was speaking from the perspective of a man who had seen their futures. The authority in his voice was absolute. It wasn't a threat, it was a prophecy. They didn't give him the money, but they didn't take it either. They backed away, confusion and a seed of primal fear planted deep in their guts. The encounter was over. The tremor had been felt. Rikuya's calculated displays of brilliance did not go unnoticed beyond the school's walls. Mr. Saito, both fascinated and ambitious, mentioned his prodigious student to an old university friend over drinks. Kaito Tanaka, a man who ran a small but respected investment fund. Intrigued, Tanaka-sensei arranged a visit to the school under the guise of a career day. He watched Rikuya from the back of the classroom during an economics debate. He saw the way the boy dismantled arguments, his predictive logic, his uncanny confidence. Afterward, he invited Rikuya for tea at a quiet shop near the school. "Your teacher speaks very highly of you," Tanaka said, his eyes sharp, missing nothing. "He says you have instincts." "Instincts are unreliable, Tanaka-sama," Rikuya replied, sipping his tea. He was playing a dangerous and delicate game. "I prefer data. Patterns. The flow of information and capital. It's all a system, and every system has a logic that can be learned. And you've learned it?" "I am learning," Rikuya said carefully. "For example, I'm learning that the common wisdom on North American grain futures is flawed. A localized drought in the Dakotas, underestimated in current reports, will create a supply shock in 70 days. The market hasn't priced it in yet." Tanaka's eyebrow twitched. This was specific, testable information from a boy who should be worrying about exams and baseball. "That's a very bold claim." "It is not a claim. It is an observation. Verify it yourself," Tanaka did. And Rikuya was right. The fund made a significant, timely profit. The relationship changed. Tanaka, a man who respected results above all else, began treating Rikuya not as a student, but as a singularly bizarre oracle. He offered him a junior analyst role, a title and a small salary that gave Rikuya his first legitimate foothold in the world of finance. It was through Tanaka that Rikuya was invited to a dinner party at the home of one of the fund's major investors, Soichiro Yamamoto, a titan of old money and traditional industry. And it was there he saw her again, Hana, Yamamoto's daughter. She was more beautiful than he remembered, poised and graceful, but with a quiet intelligence in her eyes that he'd been too love-struck to notice in his first life. She was engaged to be married to the son of a rival family, a political union to merge corporate empires. Their eyes met across the room. There was no recognition in her gaze, only a polite, distant curiosity at the poorly dressed boy her father was inexplicably taking an interest in. Soichiro Yamamoto, a man built like a bull with a voice to match, grilled Rikuya over dinner. "Tanaka says you have a nose for trends. What trend do you smell now, boy?" Every guest at the table turned to look. This was his moment. He could play it safe, offer a bland prediction. Rikuya set down his chopsticks. "The trend is ending, Yamamoto-sama, not beginning." A silence fell over the table. "Explain." "You and everyone like you are betting on stability, on traditional manufacturing and cyclical markets. But a storm is coming. A virus, currently circulating in the live animal markets of a southern province, will escape containment in approximately 22 months. It will freeze global travel. It will break supply chains. It will make the digital world not a convenience, but a necessity. Those invested in logistics, remote server infrastructure, and pharmaceuticals will not just survive, they will thrive. Those tied to the old ways." He let the sentence hang in the air, a specter at the feast. "Will need a very strong lifeline." The table was dead silent. Some guests were offended. Others looked nervously at their plates. Soichiro Yamamoto stared at him, his expression unreadable. He saw not a boy, but a panther that had wandered into his dining room. Later, as Rikuya was leaving, Hana approached him at the door. That was a very dramatic prediction. Truth often is, Rikuya replied. You speak as if you've already seen it happen. Rikuya held her gaze. Haven't you ever had a dream that felt more real than waking life? A faint blush touched her cheeks. She looked unsettled, intrigued. And in this dream of yours, what happens? That, Rikuya said, offering a small, cryptic bow, depends on the choices we make now. Good night, Yamamoto-san. He walked out into the night, leaving her staring after him, the first crack appearing in the pristine surface of her predetermined world. Rikuya's predictions continued to bear fruit. His small investments, managed through a labyrinth of anonymous digital wallets, grew into a formidable, hidden fortune. His influence within Tanaka's fund grew, and with it, his reputation among a small circle of elites who knew of the Higashi prodigy. But with visibility came risk. He began to feel it first, a prickle on the back of his neck, the sensation of being watched. He'd turn and see nothing but the crowd. Then came the signs. A file on Tanaka's server, accessed by an unknown IP, containing only notes on Rikuya's background. His orphanage landlord asking strange, probing questions about visitors. One evening, returning to his tiny apartment, a place he kept despite his growing wealth, a mask of continued poverty, he found it. Not a break-in. Nothing was disturbed. But placed squarely in the center of his worn floor mat was a single, high-quality sheet of paper. On it, typed in a crisp, anonymous font, were 5 words. You are outside the graph. The blood drained from Rikuya's face. It wasn't a threat. It was an observation, a diagnosis. It meant someone wasn't just suspicious of his methods. They understood on some fundamental level that he was an anomaly, an outlier that shouldn't exist. He spent a sleepless night analyzing every move he'd made. Had he been too bold, too fast? Was it a rival corporation, a government agency? The fear was paralyzing, but he forced it down. Fear was a variable. It could be accounted for. He increased his security. He layered his digital trails. He became more paranoid, more careful. The second message came a week later. He was walking home from a late meeting with Tanaka, the rain falling just as it had on the night he died. A black sedan, silent and sleek, pulled up beside him. The window slid down soundlessly. No one got out. A hand, gloved in black, simply extended a single envelope. Then the window rose, and the car slid back into the traffic and the rain, vanishing as if it were a ghost. Heart thundering, Rikuya tore open the envelope. Another single sheet. This one held 7 words, and it felt like a death sentence. The timeline is not yours to correct. They knew. Whoever they were, they didn't just know what he was doing. They knew how. They understood he was rewriting history. He was no longer just playing the market. He was playing against an unseen, immensely powerful opponent who knew the rules of the game better than he did. The game had just become infinitely more dangerous. The ultimate test came sooner than he expected. His memory, his infallible guide, provided the date. October 12th. The night Soichiro Yamamoto's armored car would be forced off the mountain pass road during a storm, killing him and his driver. The event that would shatter Hana, force her into a rushed and miserable marriage to secure the company, and ultimately lead to the Yamamoto conglomerate's decline. Rikuya stood at his window, watching the storm clouds gather. He had a choice. Option 1, Do nothing. Let history unfold. Yamamoto's death would create a power vacuum and market panic. Rikuya's prepared short positions would make him astronomically wealthy. It was the safe play, the smart play, the play that drew no more attention from the mysterious watchers. Option 2. Intervene. Save Yamamoto. This would irrevocably alter the timeline. His future knowledge would become unreliable from this point onward. It would be an act of war against the Watchers. And his motive? It wasn't for Yamamoto's wealth. It was for Hana. For the chance to save her from the future of quiet despair he remembered. It was an illogical, emotional, reckless decision. He made it in an instant. He called Tanaka, his voice tight with a feigned panic. "Sensei, I had a dream. A bad one. Mr. Yamamoto's car, the mountain pass. It's not safe tonight. The rain, a landslide. You have to call him. You have to make him take the coastal route. You have to." Tanaka, who had learned to trust Rikuya's dreams, heard the genuine terror in his voice. He didn't understand, but he acted. Soichiro Yamamoto, annoyed but superstitious, and respecting Tanaka's judgment, reluctantly altered his route. That night, a landslide did indeed bury the mountain pass road. The official news reports the next morning showed the wreckage of the guardrail where Yamamoto's car would have been. Yamamoto was alive. The timeline was shattered. Rikuya waited, breath held, for the consequences. The thank you call from a bewildered, grateful Yamamoto. The look in Hana's eyes the next time he saw her, a look of awe, of profound, world-shifting gratitude. She wasn't looking at a strange boy anymore. She was looking at the man who had miraculously saved her father. But the Watchers acted too. The next morning, a third message awaited him. It was slipped under his door. This one was not typed. It was written in a precise, elegant hand with black ink. "You have chosen a variable. You now are one. The equation must be balanced." Rikuya crumpled the paper. The fear was gone, burned away in the furnace of his resolve. He had saved a man he barely liked for a girl he barely knew. He had chosen human connection over cold profit. He had declared his independence from the fate they seemed to guard. He was no longer just rewriting his own life. He was at war with the architects of destiny itself. And as he looked out at the rising sun over Neo-Kyoto, Rikuya knew with absolute certainty that the second half of his second life had just begun. The battle for the future was now truly joined.